since I've seen you, my boy. Simply astounding how far you've come. It will sadden me greatly to have to kill you.
Expectations. The first Conduit game had a bunch of them. It was going to be the definitive Wii first-person shooter to prove the Wii could do first-person shooters. Unfortunately, it fell a little short. It just didn't seem to quite live up to all the potential that it was promising. Now, Conduit 2 is here, and can it fix all the wrongs that the first one did? Don't get me wrong, the first Conduit was a good game, but it just didn't quite live up to the hype. Luckily, High Voltage Software listened to all the fans and decided to fix many of the problems the first game had. But while Conduit 2 is better than the first, it still feels like it has so much more it could live up to. First, let's start with single player. Pros. This has a much better story than the first Conduit game. The first Conduit game was played out in talking head mode between levels, and during the gameplay you had to seek out radios and sort of listen to what's going on around you. For the most part, it wasn't very riveting. This time around, it has a much more light-hearted sci-fi story, almost like a B-movie for the most part, and they know it. It has the corny voice acting, which is kind of fun. Oh, and by the way, all the voice actors has changed. And a very strange story indeed. Most of the cutscenes happen in-game. It's all really fun, although the lip syncing could really use some work.
When you were growing up, I bet you didn't think you'd be saving the world one day, did you?
The good news is that while it is pretty much a generic story, anyone who likes a good sci-fi B-movie will definitely like it. Everyone sort of considers the Conduit kind of like the B-movie of first-person shooters. It has its cult following, the cult of Conduit as I like to call it, so it kind of fits. Like last time, this game has achievements to help give you money in the game so you can buy stuff in the store. Well, what's at the store? Well, upgrades, guns, and armor. Armor is more for your online character, which I'll get back to later. But the upgrades and the guns that you have can help you with loadouts that you can use in single player and multiplayer. And there are a bevy of great guns in the game that go along with all the awesome action. Now the guns this time around seem a lot more diverse, which I really enjoy. You have trust guns, human guns, and alien guns, drudge guns for that matter. And each one actually feels like a different gun for a change. In the first game, all the guns kind of felt alike, just with different sounds. Now, while the sounds in this game don't make the guns carry any weight, they at least fire differently and feel differently when using them. And there's a lot of originality to it. To a gun that works like a turret, another one that works as a shield that gathers up all the bullets and allows you to shoot them back at your opponent, and a phase rifle, which we've seen before in video games, that allow you to see through walls and shoot enemies through walls once you do see them. It's actually really cool. Most guns have secondary fire. If they don't have secondary fire, they have the ability to look down the scope, which is nice. And you'll need all the firepower you can get with all the really cool bad guys out there. They're much more interesting to look at this time around. And while a lot of them are pretty much different armor types with different weapons, I'm not really complaining. Most first-person shooters do that nowadays. I mean, just look at Call of Duty. All it is different looking bad guys with different weapons. But at least now the models have more diversity among them and look great. Speaking of looking great, this game looks great. The graphics are awesome. Now, whether or not I'm going to call it the best looking game on the Wii is up to you, but for the most part it's a lot more colorful than games like GoldenEye, and they do make good use of the bump mapping and particle effects. And the level design is excellent as well. The first game had horrible level design. Mostly it was cut and paste, not anymore. This time the levels are well detailed and seem to actually go somewhere, instead of you having extreme deja vu. In fact, it's kind of funny because the developers even make fun of that in the game. There's a lot of pulp culture references in the game, in fact, including if you are a scavenger enough in the Washington, D.C. level, you might even be able to find the Ninja Turtle. Oh, and don't forget the boss fights. Yes, this game has boss fights, something that was severely lacking in the last game. and they're all very fun, for the most part. I was a little disappointed with the very last boss battle, but I'll get to that later. There's lots of hidden things to find and unlock. Maybe too much, but using your ASE, you can run around and unlock hidden messages, find hidden artifacts, and all sorts of other things. And there's the new voice actors. They even got the voice actor of Duke Nukem, so it's kind of weird. From a nostalgia standpoint, I thought that was really cool. I love Duke Nukem, and to hear him playing Mr. Ford, I just couldn't keep wanting him to go, "Shake it, baby," and have a couple of strippers show up.
Holy crow!
Let's move on to the cons. And the new voice actors aren't all great. In fact, Prometheus now sounds like Kit from Knight Rider, which is hilarious in one way and annoying in another. There's some banter between the two that it just seems to come right out of Knight Rider. The old series, not the reboot that they did a little while ago that completely sucked. There's some predictable bad guy placement in the game as well. Most of the enemies are pretty much, you're going to know, you're going to round the corner if there's going to be some enemies there. Yeah, there's a few areas where it might be a surprise, but it's a very linear game. So unlike the last game where there are spawn points, they're pretty much just placed there. So it's a straightforward first-person shooter for single-player purposes wise, and it's not really doing anything new. But it's a fun kind of not doing anything new, so I'm not really complaining that much. While there is more diversity in the levels this time around, you'll be on an oil rig, you'll be on Atlantis, you'll be in China, etc., etc., there still seems to be a very short game. While it is nice that there's new places to visit, I did find the game actually ended rather abruptly. The very last level of the game was very, very short. There were a lot of bad guys in it, but it was the equivalent of a glorified multiplayer level that you just fought through. And the very last boss battle was extremely disappointing. Honestly, the second boss battle of the game was probably the hardest and most fun, and if they would have switched the last boss battle of the game with the second boss battle of the game, it probably would have been a very proper ending. As for what I said before about being too much hidden stuff, you're going to have to play through the game a second time to find everything in the game. There is a lot. Half the time you're going to have your ASE out just because you're afraid you're missing something. Like me, I'm always afraid I'm missing something. So what ends up happening is I shoot everyone in the room, pick up my ASE, and scan the room for everything. And you still miss stuff. And people who are dedicated to games like this will probably enjoy that, while other people will just blow through it and, well, probably forget about it, therefore making it have pretty little to no replay value, single-player wise. But all the hidden stuff does give you a reason to go back. Now on to probably my biggest gripe, the controls with the Wii Remote and Nunchuck. They're too customizable. Yeah, I just said it, too customizable. Let's see, it takes a lot of tender, loving care to hit your sweet spot when customizing just how you want it to control. No good control setting is already set up within the game. You have to tinker with it, or use your Classic Controller Pro, which is the good thing. Although the Classic Controller Pro doesn't quite feel as smooth as it did in Black Ops, it's still a nice option, and a lot of people will probably go with it, unless if you're used to playing first-person shooters with the Wii Remote Nunchuck. Seriously, high-voltage software. After playing GoldenEye, I feel really spoiled. I was able to jump into GoldenEye, use the Wii Remote Nunchuck flawlessly without having to tinker with it at all. But with Conduit 2, I've been tinkering with the Wii Remote Nunchuck, and guess what? I still haven't found that sweet spot. Thank you for the Classic Controller option. While not perfect, it's definitely better for the more casual first-person shooter fans. Now, on to multiplayer. Loadouts and upgrades. Awesome. It's nice to see it here. It's kind of like a mix between Halo meets Call of Duty. Upgrades work just like perks, if you knew that. You can do everything for faster reload, have specialization for different guns. As you play through single player and multiplayer, you get money that you can use to unlock more weapons and characters that you can use in multiplayer and customize, and more upgrades. That's the only kind of downside to it all, is there's not a lot unlocked right off the bat. So unless if you go through the single player portion, you're going to have to play a lot in order to get enough money to buy the guns you want. But that's just it. Once you find the guns you like, there's really no reason to spend any more money on the guns you never use. Unless, of course, if you use the next option. 4-player split screen is now an option, and you can do single or co-op invasion mode this way as well, which is really sweet. I really missed the 4-player split screen in the last game. Every time my friends came over, I wanted to show them Conduit, but all they could do was watch me play single player or multiplayer. Luckily, all the options and all the different kinds of modes that you can do in the game, and let me tell you, there's a lot of them. Everything from Balloon Battle, which is kind of like Mario Kart, Capture the Flag, Power Surge, which is like defending your base, Annexation, which is control points. There's even like an ASE Baseball, which is kind of like Unreal Tournament's Death Ball, VIP mode. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. But anyway, all those modes are also optional in 4-player split screen, along with online. And the best part about online is it's actually patchable this time around. Remember all those hackers in the last game? Well, hopefully High Voltage Software will be able to stay on it. And I didn't run into too much lag either. Now, speaking of patchable, it's probably a good thing that High Voltage Software can do that, because we're moving on to cons. There are a ton of bugs in one of my favorite modes, Invasion Mode. Invasion Mode is basically you and your couple of buddies, and you're supposed to survive wave after wave of spawning bad guys, which is really fun. I enjoy the heck out of it. It's my favorite mode, but it's riddled with bugs. Bad guys spawn in walls. There's a lockup and split screen after a few rounds. In fact, me and Mad Dog did a recording of us playing Invasion Mode, and in the 4th video, it proved the point, where the game locked up on us after only a few rounds, and that was very frustrating. Oh. Oh!
No, mother piece of...
Lock up. And this was after a patch. I mean, come on, High Voltage Software, what gives? We also ran into a God Mode glitch where we were invincible, and we were able to go through all the different rounds without getting hurt. It made meleeing and saving on ammo really easy, which seems fun, but it's still a glitch. There is no online invasion mode either, which is kind of disappointing because, you know, sometimes you want to play with other people, but there's no one around to play with you. So, kind of a bummer. When it comes to online matchmaking, you always have to deal with the grab bag of match types. You're not able to pick what kind of match you want to play, unlike Call of Duty or GoldenEye. This is kind of frustrating to me as well because I got spoiled by those two games. If I want to play a team deathmatch, I want to play a team deathmatch. I don't want to play a capture the flag. Or if I want to play a annexation mode, I want to play annexation mode. I don't want to play VIP, but you don't have any way of customizing unless if you're playing with friends. Oh, and by the way, you still need friend code. You are able to add rivals, but they're not considered your friend. So what gives? Other than that, besides other little glitches like people running into issues with spawning outside the map and the semi-uninspired maps that you do play on online, online and offline multiplayer is really fun and enjoyable. So to wrap things up, I basically have to say that it's good High Voltage Software can patch the game, because a few bugs are really keeping this game from being a really good first-person shooter to becoming a really great first-person shooter, like GoldenEye. While the single player was nothing new, I really enjoyed a lot of it, and there wasn't really a level in the single player portion that I didn't like, for the most part. There's some damn robo-dogs later on in the game that are annoying as all heck. Trust me, you'll know what I mean when you run into them. In the last game, there are only 1 or 2 levels in the single-player story that I felt like going back and playing after a game. This time, I could play through again and not feel like a level was a burden. While better than the first Conduit 2, still has a lot of bugs to squash before hitting that gold standard we keep expecting it to hit. It just seems that with the extra time High Voltage Software had to work on Conduit 2, many of the problems that I talked about would have been fixed. I know High Voltage Software is no Activision, and maybe they don't have all the resources in the world, but come on, a little more beta testing would have helped a lot and get rid of all those hard edges. Other than that, I'm sure hardcore Wii first-person shooter fans that belong to the cult of the Conduit will be able to let a few of these problems slide and maybe even be patient enough to wait for HVS to patch them. However, hardcore first-person shooter fans who are new to the world of Conduit and are used to playing games like Halo and GoldenEye and Call of Duty are not going to be as forgiving, and while they won't have a bad time playing Conduit 2, they might just not stick around and play it for very long. I'm giving this game a 7.5 out of 10. So much missed potential. Here's hoping Conduit 3 will be a little bit better. Thanks for listening, everyone, and don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe. I really appreciate it and helps encourage me to do more of these things. Till next time, game fans, this is Twitch. Keep playing.